Steve, congratulations on your Media Ambassador Award. So first of all, how do you feel? I mean, is that important to you, important for paddle sports?
Yes, it's very, very important, obviously. Unexpected. I think an award like this is very much needed, actually. Paddle sports tends to fly under the radar often, and this way it brings it to the surface a little bit, so there can be more, ironically, media attention to the media, but also to paddle sports in general. So very, very pleased.
Okay, so I mean, you've had quite a large career in all various types of water sports. Let's start with Canoe Outrigger. How did you make the transition from doing it, let's say, on an amateur basis to becoming an expert in that field?
I think mainly it was because there was a lack of knowledge about it when I first started paddling in Australia. There were a lot of very accomplished athletes, but there was no real knowledge about the history or the culture or even perhaps the techniques. People were just strong and muscling their way through it, but not really knowing necessarily what they were doing, albeit they were going quite quickly. So I decided just to research it and spent a year traveling around the Pacific, and then I released a book. And to which, it was, I thought I would sell it to a few Australians, but lo and behold, the Hawaiians wanted it, which is a bit like selling sand to the Arabs. And then I was encouraged to write another and another, and it just amazed me that how much material there was. Every year I could come up with another publication. And ultimately it led to being able to produce several books that were definitive by effectively combining all those books into 1, 2, and 3 different variations of a theme. Fortunately, I was able to compete at a high level as well. That made my knowledge base a lot more attuned to the methodologies, the techniques, but also the culture of the sport, which I think is one of the primary driving forces of outrigger. Is beyond any other paddle sport you can think of. The level of culture there, the spirituality, the metaphysical, the resonance you have with Melanese and Micronesian, Polynesian people is unlike any other paddle sport that there is in existence, and I think that's what keeps people connected to it.
Okay, let's talk about the 80s now, because I know that you were a pro windsurfer as well as a windsurfing instructor as well, and you wrote various texts and involved in kind of that scene as well. How has it changed from the 80s going up to the current day? What changes have we seen in media production?
Media production, well, of course, I look back now and it's quite ironic. If I look back through my photo album, as it were, say late 70s and through the 80s, I can barely find a photo. They're around, there are a few sound bites, and there's certainly a lot of good text written in magazines and long articles in prose, obviously. But what I find now is that the world's now become more instantaneous. People want things now, and they just want sound bites. It's a good thing, it's a bad thing. People are essentially instantly informed, but not always very well. I'm all for people sitting down and actually reading and learning and making a study of something. What I find now is there are actually, dare I say it, almost less experts around because everyone is an expert because they've seen something and they know it. Actually, they don't, because they've not really made a study of it. Whereas years ago, editorially, journalists or editors had to read lots and lots of text and employ very knowledgeable people to write long articles. That's not really the case anymore. In fact, they're very hard to find. And in a sea of white noise that you see on forums, people might say, oh, I'm an expert, I'll have a bit of a go. And actually, they may well be an expert, but very soon they get drowned out by the incessant noise of others who think they're experts. And of course, that never used to happen years ago. There was 1 or 2 or 3 definitive experts. They were in magazines, and we revered them and looked up to them. Now It's not so clear.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's move away from editorial now to stand-up paddling. I mean, that scene, particularly in the UK and the likes of the States, Pacific Islands, has just exploded. Why do you think it's become so popular?
It's a hard one. I mean, I think originally it was sold on the concept of it's easy and it's a workout, which I think is a diametrical opposition of one another. And nothing can be easy and a workout at the same time. It's the old 80s expression, no pain, no gain. So ultimately that was a bit of a misnomer or as a catch cry. But I think fundamentally it still remains easy. That being said, I do worry. The sport's growing very, very quickly. The imagination has been sparked of many, many thousands of people, possibly millions. My concern is the attrition rate. A lot of people have been attracted to the sport, but not necessarily coming back to it. So I think we have to be very, very careful how we look to the future. And already magazines are tending to promote the elite, big waves, hardcore racing. And that's a massive mistake because essentially, it's the ma and pa brigade, it's the children, it's the elderly, it's the women. You want to keep that gene pool deep and rich and wide, not narrow it down. Otherwise, we'll end up making it much like windsurfing did. But at the rate we're going, we could very potentially shorten the lifespan of stand-up paddleboarding, more so in a quicker rate than we do, say, with windsurfing. So. Yes, all the basic ingredients are there to make it a very exciting sport, but the industry, quote unquote, and I include the media now, need to be very, very careful to whom they're promoting it to, what are they selling it, what are they selling, what are the attributes of it. Really, really important. And again, this comes down to journalist knowledge, knowing what they're writing about.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, the future looks quite bright for paddle sports, especially with an event like tonight and various initiatives uniting paddle sports. But do you think that there is a real opportunity to get the likes of stand-up paddling, let's say ocean racing, into the Olympic program, or should we be focusing more on multi-world games, for example?
Yes, I mean, I think, whenever a new sport comes along, the first, within a very short period of time, people are already focusing on the Olympics as the zenith, the peak, the place we need to go. Whether we should or not, I think, again, that needs some reference point and considerations of, well, should we? It's like there's a mountain there, should we climb it? Is that necessary? I think when we look at some sports like tennis, you might say Wimbledon's still the best, and winning a gold medal in the Olympics actually doesn't mean so much. And there are a lot of examples of that. And I think there's going to be getting into the Olympics is very, very complicated. It's not an easy process. One of the greatest challenges stand-up paddleboarding has in particular will be simply having people getting along and agreeing on some basic principles. What board, what are the rules, what is the distance, and I think those major caveats need to be addressed. And quite frankly, right now, I don't think there's a major agreement amongst the various countries in terms of what should be put forward as a rational way to move it to something like the Olympics.
Okay, very good. A deep insight there into the world of paddle sports that are not necessarily mainstream. I think that's what we're trying to do, is promote a whole plethora of sports as well. Thanks very much, Steve.
Pleasure.
Thank you.